So I can't remember. We were maybe talking about this before we got hit record, but a lot of lawyers, they think, why would I be on LinkedIn? I'm not going to get any cases from that. And then, and you're a PI lawyer,
Right.
are you getting cases? Are your clients on there? Are you getting cases from your
So,
LinkedIn stuff?
right. So the referrals that I've gotten from LinkedIn are from lawyers. And so, and
But
it's,
you have,
I
but
have,
yes.
yeah. And it's mostly, it hasn't really been in the PI world. It's been in the partition suit world. And so to your listeners who don't know what a partition suit is, I didn't even know what one was 4 years ago. And at this point, I probably handle more of them than anyone in Richmond right now. And I can say that confidently, because I've seen the metrics from the marketing people and where people are clicking.
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hawkins. This is a podcast where I get to talk to law firm founders and owners, hear about their journeys and lessons they've learned along the way. And today's guest is a guy that I met on LinkedIn. Really like his post. He's got some really interesting things to say and some cool stuff I think that everybody's going to want to learn, especially these five-figure vacations to Europe that he only costs him, a couple $100. So we're going to talk about that too. So welcome Matt Long to the podcast. He's a personal injury lawyer in Richmond, Virginia. I think he does a few other things as well. But Matt, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell us about yourself and maybe about what you do, about what, sort of about your firm as well.
Thanks for having me again. It's, exciting to do this. I appreciate you inviting me on. My name's Matt Long, partner at Bowen, Long and Ball here in Richmond. We're a mid-sized law firm. We've got 10 lawyers, 10 staff, and our bread and butter is really family law. That's kind of what the law firm does the most of. And then we have lawyers who kind of do some other things as well. And that's me. Like you said, I do a lot of plaintiff's personal injury work. I also do a lot of, complex civil litigation, business litigation. Lately, over the last couple of years, I've been doing a lot of partition suits, which your listeners may not even know what that means, but I've been doing a lot of those. And then, your normal breach of contract type civil litigation. That's the stuff I really started when I was a baby lawyer. So baby lawyers, a lot of times they start doing criminal work, traffic work, court appointed work. I got thrown to the fire doing like complex business litigation when I was 10 minutes out of law school. So that's just kind of what I've always stuck with. Of course, it's harder to get those types of clients. So outside of the personal injury work, it's sort of a robust civil litigation practice.
Okay, so I've got questions about that. So I assume that's hourly. Is that an hourly practice?
Yes. So the contingency fee work is just personal injury. Everything else is hourly. I think there are lawyers out there that would take a business litigation case on a contingency fee. I would advise you not to do that. I think that's a really bad idea. But
I've tried it. Don't do it.
Maybe if you're suing Amazon, but even then, but no, it's all hourly.
Yeah, I've done that. Used to do a lot of business litigation, and certainly, there's a risk that the money just disappears, and then it turns into a fraudulent transfer case that can go on for decades, and it's just like,
right.
Don't do it. Yeah.
Right.
But
right.
So the other thing, I've talked to a lot of folks, and just from my personal experience too, it's how do you balance the hourly work with the contingency work? There's some folks I've talked to, and you either gravitate one way or another. You sort of have a tendency to do that. You're like, well, the hourly stuff, they're going to pay me this month, so I'll just go ahead and do that. And this contingency may take years, or it's like, I just rather do the contingency work and not the hourly. How do you balance that?
So if I could wave a magic wand, if I'm being perfectly candid, I would just do the personal injury work, but the reality is that unless, for most lawyers, unless you're at, a high volume, big billboard personal injury law firm, your PI work is going to be kind of like this, and that's just the reality, and so, and it's been like that my whole career. I get a lot of referrals and then I don't get any. And so really the billable work is sort of to supplement everything, in between PI cases. And of course, PI cases take a long time to resolve. But, that's just the reality of it. Just like everyone else who isn't at a high volume billboard personal injury shop, you know, that's where most of the cases go, right? A certain law firm out of Florida that may or may not spend $1 billion on marketing a year, they haven't even opened an office here yet, but their ads are already all over town. There's 6 billboards. They've started advertising on the buses, and they don't even have an office here. So they're going to get a lot of market share real quick. And so, with that being said, if it was more balanced, it's really, even with volume, you still have to wait for personal injury cases to resolve, where the billable work is, revenue that can come in, as you're waiting on the PI cases, which, to your point, I mean, they could take 1, 2, 3, 4 years sometimes, which is a really long time to wait for a case to resolve.
So I was looking at your firm too. You mentioned it's sort of the bread and butters of family law. Your firm from the outside looks sort of like an old school firm to me, where
Right.
it's like multi-discipline practice areas.
Right.
Nowadays more and more firms are just have niche sort of practices, maybe one or
Right.
two sort of practice areas. Richmond, I mean, it's not that small of a town. It's not New York
Right.
City, but I'm curious sort of the history of your firm and how these practice areas sort of came about and how you guys have stuck together and how it works.
So that's been kind of fluid over the years, I guess. I actually, this is my 10-year anniversary this month. I started on August 20th, 2015. So August 20th, 2025 will be my 10-year anniversary. The law firm itself, I believe, started either the year before or the year prior. I think 2014, maybe 2013. I can't remember. And, for the first maybe 5, 6, 7 years of the firm, it was mostly just family law. And that was the sort of where the brand was focused and where all the marketing was focused. Because that's what all the lawyers that were here, like that's mostly what they did, with a few outliers. And then I guess over the last 4 or 5 years, as we've added lawyers, practice areas have kind of expanded. And so we work with a fractional, like, chief marketing officer, which is really a company. And that's part of what they advise us on is, sort of going forward, what do we want to do? Because when you say, like, to an outsider's perspective, like, this is what I see, like, that's important. I'm going to go back to my marketing people and say, hey, I had this podcast. This is what Jonathan told me. Like, you need to know this. Like, you need to understand this. And so it's always kind of fluid and it's always kind of changing. And I think that, we don't want to do everything, like there are practice areas that we don't do anymore. Like we used to do criminal law. We don't do that anymore. We used to do bankruptcy. We don't do that anymore. And so, it's sort of figuring out, what are the 3, 4, maybe 5 things we do well and just focus on that. But you're right. It's when you're a small law firm, and you have smart lawyers that have been around a long time, and there's someone who calls and says, I need help with X, that's the challenge. Do you send them on their way, right? Even though you can help with X, or do you not? And, this is something I think all law firms kind of debate.
Yeah. So let me circle back. You said you used to do criminal and bankruptcy.
The firm did, yeah.
That's what I mean. The firm did.
Yeah.
So take me through sort of the strategic process of jettisoning those practice areas. Was it that there was a lawyer that did it that left and you just didn't reconstitute it? Or was it, hey, we're just going to stop doing it?
Combination of the two. So the lawyers that did it did leave, but we do have lawyers here now that do know how to do those things, but it's just not really, it doesn't really make sense from a dollars and cents standpoint, because those are volume-based practices for the most part, unless you're representing murderers, right, or drug dealers. For the most part, criminal law and bankruptcy law is going to be a volume-based thing. Like, one of our partners, she does estate planning and she's great at it, and that is volume. And she has a lot of volume, but it's hard for a law firm to make money on criminal law unless you just have tons and tons and tons and tons of criminal law clients.
Well, it makes the marketing message easier when you have fewer, that's for sure, as you
Right,
alluded
right.
to a minute ago.
And we historically have, when it comes to our marketing spend and our marketing budget, it's mostly geared towards family law, and I think it's pretty. I mean, it works well. I mean, since we've been talking for the last 10, 15 minutes, the phone's probably rang 15 times, and that's awesome. And that takes a lot of time to do. But at the same time, you know, most of the lawyers here have been practicing longer than I have. And so there's a lot of referrals coming from clients, ex-clients, other lawyers. As you know, I'm real active on LinkedIn. I do get referrals from LinkedIn from other lawyers. I think most lawyers who get LinkedIn referrals, it's probably from other lawyers. I don't know how many clients are going to LinkedIn to find a lawyer. I don't know. I haven't met someone yet. Maybe they're out there, but so it's interesting how business comes into a law firm.
So I do want to talk about LinkedIn in a minute. I want to come back to that because there's a lot there. Let's put a pin in that. I want to hear about the cases you've gotten because I have heard, I'm on LinkedIn a good bit. I get a lot of cases on there. Most people at least have the belief that the B2B type practice areas are easier to get there. And that's probably true. I don't know, but you're at B2C. I know of others, PI attorneys who've gotten cases. I mean, they're referrals, like you said.
Right.
But so, yeah, I want to come back to that. But first, so, I've talked to personal injury lawyers who, part of their story is, we represented insurance companies. We were on the defense side, and now I know the inside, and I can help you on the plaintiff side, blah, blah, blah. Well, you've got a different version of that story that's really interesting to me.
Yes.
And that is that your mom was an adjuster for an insurance company. And I came across some article you wrote, or I don't know if it was on LinkedIn, where you said, yeah, if you practiced PI work in Virginia for a while, you probably encountered my mom. So what was that like having your mom there? And then you you coming to the plaintiff side, what did she think about that?
So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call her a adjuster. I would call her the adjuster. So, she worked for Allstate, which I think I can say because she's retired now. And she was, for a period of time, like the main, like serious bodily injury adjuster in Virginia for a very long time. And, I meet colleagues and they're like, oh, that was your mother? Like, I don't know what they mean when they say that. I don't know. But, and so, yeah, when I was eating Happy Meals, we used to talk about underinsured motorist coverage, when I was 8 years old, which is insane. And so, when I graduated law school, I already kind of spoke the language, I guess. But to be honest with you, it's never something that I thought about like doing, either from the plaintiff or the defense side. It was just like, that's something my mother does. I want to do something else. And so, the first job I got out of law school, well, I've had two jobs, this and another firm. And, and it was, like I said, it was a lot of business litigation, stuff like that. And then one day, a personal injury client came in, and one of the partners at the time, he did that kind of in his spare time. And I was like, oh yeah, I think that's what my mother does. And I remember calling her, and she's like, you should learn how to do that, man. Like that was what she said. She's like, really? She's like, oh yeah. But she never steered me towards the defense. Like she was like, no, you do plaintiff's work. Like don't do defense work, do plaintiff's work.
You should see some of the checks we're sending out, Matt. You should see this.
So that's like the next person that called in, like I kind of took the file and then, called my mother, and I was like, what do I do? And so because she's my mother, assuming it wasn't an Allstate case, I mean, she was happy to talk to me about what to do. And I spent more time talking to her in my early career than I did other lawyers about how to manage these files. And it was eye-opening getting like, here's our process on our end, and here's what we need to put the ball in the end zone. And your colleagues don't understand that, but let me, dear God, just teach you how to do that. And so here I am 17 years later, still using that blueprint that she taught me 17 years ago to put cases in the end zone in 2025. So, and we still talk all the time. So it's been great.
That's really interesting. Part of your job as a PI attorney is, I think, make it easy for the other side to want to resolve the case. And there's a variety of techniques, I guess, or approaches. One, you can be a raging asshole and just be so obnoxious that they're like, I don't want to deal with this guy, I'm mad anymore.
Right.
Or you can give them the things they need to go check the boxes on their end to get the money that then, whatever, get it to you. And so I would imagine that having your mother there that can sort of speak the inside lingo, I mean, that's invaluable, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think there's a philosophy too that you have to buy into. So, I mean, I was, I guess, sort of taught this from an early age because she used to come home and be like, "Oh, so and so, am I allowed to swear on here?"
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so and so asshole at XYZ law firm, was rude to me on the phone today and blah 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 blah, and they don't understand their case, and they're just sending me a whole bunch of medical records, and it's not organized, and I can't ever get them on the phone. I can only get their paralegal. So it's like these are the things I'm hearing now in my teenage years, right, where I'm older and I understand it a little bit more. So when I became a lawyer, it's like here are the things I don't want to do, but I think when I say it's philosophical, like I mean, like that's the way I feel, and that's what's worked for me. But you talk to a lot of personal injury lawyers; they file suit the next day, and they don't even talk to the adjuster ever. They never even, because now they're dealing with the defense lawyer, and now the case is resolving, 1 to 2 years later. But that's just a philosophy a lot of lawyers have. But one of the things I guess I learned from my own mother was that most adjusters don't care. What does that mean? Like they aren't like the TV commercials. They're not sitting there trying to figure out how to not get your client money. They just have a job to do and they're not emotionally invested in it at all. Like they just want to close the file and go home and go on vacation. Like they are not sitting there twitching their mustaches, figuring out like, how do I railroad Matt's client? Like they don't care. If it was up to them, they would give me $1 million every time. And so really the secret is figuring out a way to get them to care so they can go rattle their boss and ask for big checks. And it's really that simple. I don't know why, just to dumb it down. And I don't think a lot of lawyers understand that if you were to take every adjuster in America and put them in a line, 95% of them would agree with what I just said. And that's just, those are facts. Those are facts. So.
And I assume that's served you well in your career.
It has served me well. I mean, it doesn't always work like that, obviously, because sometimes you have bad facts or sometimes you have, just, cases where it's just, it is what it is. But I mean, this is something I've talked about on LinkedIn quite a bit, and a lot of people have agreed with me. A lot of people have disagreed with me, but I feel that a lawyer's highest and best use is what I'm going to call social engineering. So that's getting other people to do what your client wants. And it's kind of tricky, and so it's, and some might say it's sort of, I don't know, shady, not shady, but, if you have a position or your client has a position, if you can convince the other side to take that position, even though they don't want to, like you win, right? Like that's a good day at the office. And so obviously it's easier to do that in a case that doesn't have as much emotion, right? So if you're a family law attorney and you're fighting over custody, it's a little bit hard to social engineer your outcome, right? But if you're just dealing with money and it's not even that person's money, it's a little bit easier to social engineer the outcome you want through mirroring and, language and building trust and forming relationships. Like, where do your kids go to school again? Like, you're in Philly. Are you an Eagles fan? Like that type of stuff gets people to like you and trust you a lot quicker than, firing off lawsuits. At least that's been my experience. And so then with other civil litigation where you're just fighting over money and it's not as emotional, sometimes it's a lot easier to really get the other lawyer to sort of buy into your position if you can do things that, if you can be more organized than they are, if you can be more on top of things if they are, if you can control the narrative in the courtroom, right, with the judge and with the discovery and everything, eventually you sort of have control of the case. And a lot of people, Jonathan, just want to be told what to do. right? And that's lawyers also, in my experience. And that's just the way I've always practiced. It's like, how can I engineer the outcome the way I want? And typically that's controlling the narrative, controlling the room, whether it's with an adjuster or another lawyer, or even with the judge or, the jury or whatever.
So how did you learn this? Did somebody teach this to you? Is this something you just sort of figured
I
out and
listen to a lot
tested
of
over there?
podcasts.
Okay.
I listen to a lot of podcasts. I mean, I'm serious. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I've been to a lot of conferences, and I try to absorb stuff that's sort of outside the box thinking, I guess. And honestly, from my own experience being a lawyer, God, I hope this doesn't sound arrogant. I'm going to try to say this in a way that doesn't sound arrogant. So I've always been a very organized person, almost to the point of OCD, right? And that's worked well for me as a lawyer, right? So in any case, I'm very organized. And more often than not, the other side is not. And this is something every lawyer knows what I'm talking about. Lawyers don't return phone calls, right? They don't return emails. They don't, so if you're on top of your case more than they are, and you've got the lay of the land better than they do, you know, you can use that to your leverage a lot of the time in a lot of cases because of just the way social interactions work between people. I don't know if I'm explaining this the right way, but if you've got a lawyer that isn't organized and isn't on top of their discovery and isn't on top of their facts, and you are, and you can use that to many times get what you want. And I didn't learn that anywhere other than just experience, because I encounter it so often, at least in my little neck of the woods. Now, maybe if I was at a big law firm, right, an AM 100 firm, and I was dealing with AM 100 lawyers on the other side, like who had an army of associates and an army of paralegals, it would be different, right? But when you're at a small law firm and you're dealing with other lawyers at other small law firms, you get a wide range of people out there. And I don't know if I'm explaining that well or not, but it's just something that I've learned on my own and by listening to a lot of podcasts and going to conferences and paying attention to sort of the psychological negotiation part of law, the language part of law, like why words matter, if that makes sense.
It does. And I mean, lawyers are busy, man. They're overwhelmed. Lots of them are overwhelmed. And, we
Yes.
all have that at moments at least, but some have it like all the time, So,
Yeah. And I go through phases, and, it's funny. I remember last year around March, my paralegal, who's great, she told me, she's like, Matt, you need to slow down. I was like, what? She's like, you're driving me crazy, and you're driving everyone else in the office crazy. Like, she said those words to me, and I was like, okay, heard. You know what I mean? Like, heard. And she's right. I was at capacity, and so my temper was shorter. I was more stressed out, and I was driving everyone nuts. And I'm glad that she told me that. So I scaled it back. I scaled it down. I took less work and sort of reset to even, which is, where you want to be, I think, right?
well, there's two good things there. One, that your paralegal felt comfortable to tell you, and number two, that you took it well and actually didn't chop her head off,
Oh yeah, no, I'm very open to constructive feedback from everyone in my life, almost to my detriment. So I take feedback from everyone here at the office well, and listen to what people are saying. And, I want people to feel comfortable telling me that, because if I'm stressing everyone out, that's a problem, right? I don't want people to be stressed out. And that's, you know, one thing that's important for us as a law firm is to not have any like door slammers. You know what I mean? Like someone that's, oh no, like that person's angry today, because that just ruins everyone's day at the office. And so I was turning into that person, and I got called out on it. And I'm really glad she said something, because I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the, oh, Matt's angry, like stay away from Matt guy, because no one likes that person.
Yeah, so let's circle back to LinkedIn. There's a lot there. Probably won't get to all of it, but take me back. So how did you get involved in LinkedIn? There is this pretty vibrant legal community on LinkedIn, but there's a lot of lawyers that are not on there.
Right.
And so how did you get involved? You post a good bit. What's your
Yeah.
history?
So I'm going to give someone a plug. Is that allowed?
Yeah, do it.
Okay, so I had worked with a consultant named Wendy Merrill. She now owns her own
Okay.
company called Strategy Horse,
I know Wendy.
and yeah, so she's great, and she was the one who told me. She's like, Matt, you what did she say? She's like, you like running your mouth, you're funny, and you're self-deprecating. You need to get on LinkedIn. Like I think that was literally what she said, and I was like, LinkedIn, isn't that like what's LinkedIn? Isn't that like I think I have a LinkedIn account. I'm not sure if I've
It's
ever used it.
resumes, just online
Right,
resumes,
right.
right?
I was like, my wife is in sales, so she knows about LinkedIn, and she has her opinions about it. And I was like, yeah, that isn't that for salespeople and recruiters, right, and marketing people. And so she was the one who sort of inspired me. She's like, no, just go on there, be authentic, and just start yakking away your thoughts. Just like start yakking away my thoughts. So anyway, that's what I did, and it seemed to work out well for me. And it took time to figure out like what do people care about, because there's a lot of here are 5 steps, here are 5 things that you need to do to improve your law firm, or people don't care about that stuff. And then as time moved on, like I figured out, for me at least with my voice, what worked was, you know, trying to be funny, trying to be bold, right? So what does that mean? Like say something bold, just say something bold. And for me, I've discovered like the more self-deprecating I am, the more engagement I get. Which not everyone can do that. Like not everyone can be self-deprecating. And so I try to mix in some self-deprecating stuff with some more serious stuff. But my process now is I work out 3 times a week. I finish my workout, I get in the car, something comes to my mind, I voice to text an email to myself, I edit it, I upload it to Chat GPT, and I say, can you edit this for grammar and spelling? And then I copy it and paste it. And that's my routine. And I do that 3, 4 times a week. And I've been doing it for like a year now. So
Yeah. So when did you get started? About a year ago or before that?
no, I got started two years ago. 2 years ago, summer of 23 was when I got started. I had an account, but I didn't really start posting until summer of 23.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back because I met Wendy on LinkedIn.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm trying to think back when I started. I've been doing, maybe it's 3 years ago or so, three and a half.
Right,
I don't know. I lose track of time. But it's interesting, just my own experience, how it's sort of changed. I mean, more people are there now.
right,
They're always tweaking that algorithm. It's harder, I think, to get lots of reach compared to 3 years ago. And then you go through these phases where it's video, and now you got to do these pictures, and you got to do this. And there was that time when it was all AI generated photos, and I mean,
right.
you go through these waves, and then there's some people that are on there that's just slow and steady. It's like Frank Ramos, or same. I don't know if you follow him. Same kind of posts for decades. He's been on there
Right.
for like forever. But I'm
And
with you too. Like when I first started, number one, it was sort of weird, felt weird. I was
right.
like, man, this just feels weird. And it took me a while to sort of get my voice. And I go through phases and I experiment. But yeah, early on, the posts were sort of, you know, risk averse, bland, whatever. And you get a
Right.
little more bold as you do it longer, I think.
Yeah, and it's funny because the only 2 social media I use are LinkedIn and Facebook. And I use Facebook a lot more, like it's fun. I mean, I mainly I like reading about sports, travel, and seeing pictures of people's pets. Like that's really my social media. You don't really have that on LinkedIn. And so for me, it's difficult because I'm not really that engaged in like my feed because it's not as interesting to me. I mean, some people are, but what I've learned is that if I try and be like my authentic self on LinkedIn, which is what I am on Facebook, that's where I get the engagement, being more like I said, bold, but also using a little bit hyperbole. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I say things sometimes that I don't even really believe. I'm just saying it because I know people are going to grab it. And my biggest post, I think I had 1.5 million impressions.
Nice.
And it was I had just got an email from someone that was like, here's my offer. I need to hear back from you, or in 4 days, the offer's off the table. That stuff drives me nuts. And so I went on this rant about how like lawyers who do that are horrible lawyers, and how I don't even like give the offer to my client, which is of course a lie because you have to do that. But anyway, I went on a rant and I used a lot of hyperbole, but it created so much engagement. People being like, I feel the same way. Let me tell you about what happened to me last week, and it hit home with so many lawyers. Like that little, I need to hear back in 4 days. I don't care what you have going on in your life. I don't care if you're in a trial all week. I don't care if your wife is sick. I need to hear back in 4 days or the offer's off the table. That hit home with so many people. And when you touch on something like that, I think those are what hit the hardest, not just with lawyers, but with other people. And then, of course, a lot of lawyers chime in. It's like, I can't believe you, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I'm just kidding. But
Well, there was a post you did fairly recently I thought was hilarious and just was great, but I wanted to get the follow-up story to it. It was the one, I mean, if anybody that's been on LinkedIn for a while, you just get flooded in your DMs with all these, solicitations, AI
right.
stuff. It's obnoxious, and it's, the AI stuff, they've got to clamp down on that. But you went out and posted this thing about, okay, this is my autoresponder message. Here's my email. Just email me instead.
Right.
What was the response to that? Did it fill your inbox, or what happened?
I don't know, because it was already happening anyway. So I get now most of it goes straight to the spam filter, right? And so every morning I have like the spam digest email, and it just goes on for 1,000 years. And so it was already happening. And now, granted, I still get a lot of the stuff that misses the spam filter. So when I posted that, I can't really sit here and say it increased because it was already totally obnoxious. However, enough people said, Matt, you need to get rid of your email, that I changed it to just say, please email me, but I didn't give my email. But yeah, ever since I've been using LinkedIn in a way that generates impressions and engagements, all of that stuff ramped up already. Of course, in my DMs, but in my inbox as well. It is overwhelming. And it was funny that Virginia trial lawyers, we had a LinkedIn session today at 11 to talk about LinkedIn. And there were, Brewster was on there, who you may know, Brewster Rolls, Sharif Gray. So they were like the people leading it, and a few other lawyers. And, I was just in the audience in the Zoom, but that was one of the questions that was asked by one of the people, like, what do you do with all that? And they both said the same thing. I just ignore them, which is what I do. But I get it. Like I said, my wife is in sales and she's very good at it. And, she doesn't do that. But has she been in roles where she's had to do that? Yeah, because that's just how sales and marketing works. These blast out on LinkedIn to people,
It's a shame. I mean, I'm not sure it works for anybody. I feel like,
right.
On the one hand, you're like, it must work somewhere. It must work for somebody. But I think probably the answer is it's some young person who's never done it, and they hire an agency that says, trust me, it'll work. And then they do that, and then they do it for a while, and they're like, yeah, it doesn't work. And so they never do it again. But then there's somebody new that tries it. And it's just over and over.
Well,
but it's just highly ineffective. It's
very easy to do, from my understanding, is, if you've got a CRM that's got, that you can basically upload your LinkedIn, that integrates with LinkedIn, you can tell it, hey, send this DM to all of my LinkedIn contacts, or everyone who's got this job title. And then boom, it's just, here's 3,000 DMs. But it doesn't bother me anymore. It's kind of a joke. But the reason I did that, though, was because I do get the legitimate messages, but I don't ever see them because I'm never checking LinkedIn Messenger. So if a lawyer's reaching out to me to refer to me a client, or someone else is reaching out to me, I'm never going to see their message because I don't ever check LinkedIn Messenger, so that's why I put that on there.
And so that sort of leads us to sort of the next question. So I can't remember, we were maybe talking about this before we hit record, but A lot of lawyers, they think, why would I be on LinkedIn? I'm not going to get any cases from that. And then, and you're a PI lawyer,
Right.
are you getting cases? Are your clients on there? Are you getting cases from your
So,
LinkedIn stuff?
right. So the referrals that I've gotten from LinkedIn are from lawyers. And so, and
But
it's,
you have,
I
but
have,
yes.
yeah, and it's mostly, it hasn't really been in the PI world. It's been in the partition suit world. And so, to your listeners who don't know what a partition suit is, I didn't even know what one was 4 years ago. And at this point, I probably handle more of them than anyone in Richmond right now. And I can say that confidently, like, because I've seen the metrics from the marketing people and where people are clicking. And so, two, boyfriend, girlfriend buy a house together, right? And then they break up, right? And then one of them wants to live there, the other one wants to sell it, and they can't agree something. That's what a partition suit is. Or three kids inherit property from mom and dad. One of them wants to live there, one of them wants to rent it out, one of them wants to sell it. All three kids hate each other. They haven't talked to each other in 30 years. That's a partition suit. And so I yak away enough about it on LinkedIn that other lawyers are like, oh, that's what Matt does. And so I'll get referrals from, and the intake team will say, yeah, so and so called. They were referred to you by John Smith Esquire. I don't know John Smith Esquire, but I look on LinkedIn and he follows me on LinkedIn. And so that's where it's come in. And then also on the PI side, it's happened too. I'll have, people maybe from law school or college that I haven't talked to in a long time who are either lawyers or come across a PI situation that, this all comes through intake and they'll tell me, yeah, call, they said they were referred to you by, Bill Jones, your friend from high school, and Bill Jones follows me on LinkedIn. So I'm assuming that's where it came from. Maybe it could have just come in, but it's tended to work well. But at the same time, Sharif was saying this on the VTLA thing today, and I tend to agree with him. At the same time, I don't really have a plan. He said that. Hopefully, I'm allowed to repeat what he just said. I'm just posting and seeing what happens at this point because I don't think I've been doing it long enough to sort of formulate a plan like Brewster has because his everyone knows who he is and he gets lots of cases because he's built this brand of, this is the work I do. I'm one of the few people that do it. I do it well. I do it all over the country, and he gets a lot of business. I'm yakking away about cats and travel. So I haven't gotten to that point yet. You know what I mean? I'm talking about a whole lot of stuff, whereas he's just focusing about these things, if that makes sense.
It does. We'll talk about the travel in a second, but real quick, thanks for listening. If you're getting any value out of this podcast, please take 2 seconds to hit the subscribe button and leave a 5-star review. It would really mean a lot to me. Now back to the show. I want to hear your experience. So your referrals, are they primarily from sort of local, semi-local people, or are they from around the country?
Everything I do is local. So yeah, it's all local stuff. Yes. I mean,
you're not getting referred a partition case from a lawyer in California.
No. Now there's a company I work with called Even Up with my personal injury work, and I'm a big fan of theirs, and I talk about them a lot. A lot of lawyers will reach out to me about them, like, oh, I heard you talking about them. I'm thinking of using them. Can I talk to you? I probably have one or two of those a week, and foreseeably, if that lawyer ever has a PI case in Richmond, maybe they'll remember me. But yeah, it's mostly local.
Yeah, I'll tell you, my experience, which I'm curious what your experience is, but, I post on there a lot. And so there's a lot of people that interact. They may comment,
Right.
They may like, I see them, but there's a ton of people locally here in Atlanta that they're like ghosts. There's no evidence that they exist. And then I'll
Right.
bump into them somewhere and they talk about, oh yeah, I see you on LinkedIn all the time. So it's
right.
And I tell people that when I encourage them to get on there, it's like, you've got people that interact and they see you, but there's this huge population of lawyers that are lurking and they're seeing you. And it's like going to a bar event or sending them a note or sending them an email. It's like you're constantly in their face. So why not do it? I mean, I know we're busy, but figure out a way to do it.
Or do something, and our marketing team handles like our law firm stuff, right? So our law firm has a LinkedIn page, our law firm has a Facebook page, our law firm has an Instagram page, and they do all that. what's cool about LinkedIn is, you can be your own brand, which is harder to do with Facebook or Instagram, to separate, Matt Long, the lawyer, from Matt Long, the person. But with LinkedIn, you can be both. And, I think having a personal brand is real important in 2025, and so that it allows you to do that and have a platform for doing that where there's people out there who care about that stuff. Because if I were to go on Facebook and talk about lawyer things, no one cares. No one cares.
Yeah.
No one cares at all. So,
So you mentioned a minute ago, you talk about travel, and this is
right.
something I came across. Came across this the other day, and then I was digging. I found two of these at least. So you did post the other day. You did an $80,000 trip to Europe, and your
Mhm.
out of pocket cost was $500. And then there was another trip, 16-day trip to Italy, $40,000 cost. It only cost you, I don't know, $250. How'd you do it, man?
So 15 second synopsis of how I did it is, and this is just you know, really dumbing it down. So, you're on an airplane and you see a little brochure in front of you in the seat, and it says, sign up for this American Airlines card and, spend $3,000 in the next 4 months and we'll give you, 80,000 American Airline points. Well, you do that and then you do it again and you do it again and you do it again until you die. And that's how you do it. And that's the
So what
answer.
do you cancel the card and then reapply later or what?
No, so this is where like how far in the weeds do you want to go? So again, the 15-second answer is, you know year one always makes sense because the value of the points you're getting is much more than whatever the annual fee is. So the little brochure in the airline, maybe it's a $99 annual fee. Maybe the value of the points you're getting is $1,000. So, if I were to say to you, hey, you give me $99 and I'm going to give you back 1,000, is that a deal you're going to take? Yes, everyone's going to take that deal. The real analysis is in year two, right? So in year two, you either downgrade to something without a fee, right? Or a lot of these cards will give you what's called retention offers, where they will give you basically a new sign up bonus, or you just cancel. And so, if I have an app that tracks all this stuff for me. If I were to pay every annual fee for every card my wife and I have right now, it would be, I think, $11,500. We're not paying $11,500. We're probably paying close to $150. So that's the real challenge, is dealing with that year to year. But yeah, it's really that simple. I mean, it's not that simple, but that's the simple explanation. So
So how did you figure all this out? I mean, I've got cards, I get points, but it seems too overwhelming to me to sit
right,
down and try to figure out. So how do you? And I think you had a
right,
post, and you're like, I should write a book, or maybe you are right. I
right.
think you should. You could gear this. I
Oh, I
mean, I
am
know that
writing a book.
there are
So,
points people out there, but are there any points people out there for lawyers? You
so how I got into it is, I kind of got into it a little bit on the cash back side, so, I just had a debit card, and then I had a friend who worked at Capital One, and she told me about this, like, 2% Capital One cash back card. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I got a travel card. And then really what happened, and, and I'll plug someone else, a friend of mine from college in 2019 started a Facebook group called Travel on Points. And now it is I think the second biggest points and miles group on the internet after the Points Guy. So I think, a lot of people have heard of the Points Guy. They're now number two. So they've gone from zero to almost 200,000 members in like 6 years. And they're really geared towards beginners. And so I joined the group and I asked a lot of questions. And that's really where I learned. And I've sent a lot of other people there who have learned there too. And so I learned by going to that group specifically, asking questions, but then also just kind of learning on my own, because it became a hobby. It became something that I got into, like people get into cryptocurrency, right? Or whatever. Like, this is my hobby. But with that being said, I do believe that most of the content out there is confusing. I believe most of the content out there is overwhelming. Most of the content out there is written sort of for nerds, if you will, which is why I'm writing the book, because the book is designed to be something that a sixth grader could understand, which I think it can be that simple if presented in the right way. So that's my goal.
So these trips, I mean, obviously you're paying for your tickets. Do they pay for the hotels too? I mean, are
Yeah,
they paying for
yeah.
meals? I mean, how are you doing this?
No, no. So, like when I say that so we talked earlier about the hyperbole. So that would be hyperbole. It cost way more than $550 when you include food and you include gifts and you include and tours. I'm just talking about the flights and the hotels. So that's all the flights and the hotels cost me. I still had to pay for everything else just like everyone else does. But flying over first class or business class with the lie flat seating or the suite, and then the 5-star hotels, I mean, that's all it cost.
So when is this book coming out, man? I need a copy.
So here's the thing. I've written half of it. I've written about 40,000 words. Most books like this are 60 to 80,000 words. I went to a conference in February in San Francisco to learn about all of this. And basically you can either self-publish, which I'm not interested in doing. I don't have time. And I don't care enough to do that. Like that works if you're trying to save the universe, right? Like if you want to write a book about saving the whales, like maybe you self-publish that, but this is not like that. Or you can pitch it to sort of low, like independent publishing houses, right? That don't really have the reach of the larger ones. And then if you really want to do well and have it pop, you've got to pitch it to, bigger publishing houses. And they only work with agents, which is what I learned. And so I'm in the pitching to agent part of this process. And I'm working with an entertainment lawyer who knows a lot about that. And I'm also pitching them to agents on my own. So that's where I am right now. To be determined if the market cares, right? So it may be too niched and there may be too much like free content on the internet already where a book maybe wouldn't work. And if that's the case, I'll stop and do something else. But enough people have seemed interested in it that I think it's going to work out. On the other hand, I use the analogy of cryptocurrency a lot. I have a lot of friends that are really into crypto, like really into it. And according to them, they've made some money with it. I don't know if that's true. That's what they tell me. And so, kind of like the idea of traveling for free is something most people are interested in. The idea of making money is also something most people are interested in. And so when I asked my crypto friends, hey, how did you make money with crypto? After about 10 seconds, I tune out. I was like, I don't care. I don't care. And so with this stuff, it's kind of the same thing. I think everyone likes the idea of traveling for free or going to Europe and having an $80,000 5-star trip that costs $500. But when you start explaining it, how many people after 10 seconds are going to be like, I don't care. And that's what we got to figure out, right?
Well, it's interesting. You got these gatekeepers. You got to pitch to the
Right.
agents first, and you're getting turned down probably left and right. And you finally find one. Then they're going to go pitch to all these other people. You
Right.
get turned down everywhere.
So the advice that I got from experts is don't do any more work until that happens. You've written 40,000 words. Stop working. Let these people do their job, and then circle up. And if it works, if it doesn't, don't be one of those people who spin their wheels and pitch a book the rest of their life. Don't worry. Don't be that person. I was like, I won't be that person. Don't worry about that. So.
If you hit nothing but dead ends, then maybe reconsider the self-publish because I will buy it. Sure. So.
Maybe, yeah. Well, it's funny. I never thought about LinkedIn being a platform for this stuff, but like I think that's how we, because I was talking about this, and then someone mentioned like a podcast or a video, and I was like, I'm not really, interested. I'm not interested in doing that on my own. I'd be interested in going on someone else's, and that's kind of how we connected. But yeah, no, I'm interested in, and it's, it's funny because everyone at the office knows I'm into it, and we've got 20 people here. How many people here are really into this? I don't know, 2 out of 20, 2. So I mean that may be enough evidence right there. You know what I mean? I got 20 smart people, and only 2 of them have taken the plunge. The other 18 are like, I don't care.
True, but they want it. They just don't want to work for it. You're selling the dream. You're selling the destination, and you're giving them the playbook.
Right.
Only 2 out of 20 are actually going to do anything with it. But
right.
I would be one of those.
Right.
But you just got to
Well,
put it
no,
out there.
it's exciting, and we'll see where it goes. But for anyone listening, Travel on Points Facebook, great for beginners if you want to sort of learn how this stuff works. And people keep asking me on LinkedIn, and that's just where I keep sending them. It's like this platform is not the type of platform where I can engage in the back and forth that we need to do to answer your questions, about your trip to Rome. So,
Well, that's really cool stuff. So another thing
right.
I came across, you're a poker player. So
Yes,
how
yes.
serious of a poker player are
I
you?
mean, I'm not that serious. There's a, I mean, I live in Richmond. The closest real casino is the MGM National Harbor in Maryland. It's like an hour and a half drive. I go there once a month, spend the night, and play poker. So I guess I'm that serious.
So are you one of the sharks taking advantage of the tourists, or are you getting taken
No, I mean,
advantage
I'm
of?
not doing anything crazy. I'm playing the low limit cash games like $1, $3 blinds, $2, $5 blinds. But you know, I I'm kind of a nerd with that, like I am with the points. I listen to the podcast, and I mean, and this is something new that I've gotten into since Virginia has legalized sports gambling. So, Virginia legalized sports gambling, and I'm not a reckless gambler person, but I am into football and I am into sports. So I started messing around with that. And I was like, oh, that's kind of fun. And then I was like, I used to play a lot of poker when I was younger. Maybe I should start doing that again. And then I kind of got into that. So that's been kind of my new hobby, maybe over the last, 9 months to a year. So, yep.
Are you a math guy?
I'm
Are
not
you
a math guy.
running all the
I am
statistics?
a I am a reading people guy. I mean that's what lawyers do, right? I'm a reading the people next to me and seeing how they react to the cards as they come out, and also watching their patterns, how they bet, when they bet. I mean, I'm not an expert, there's people that, are professionals. It's just really something I do for fun, and the stakes are really low. So if I lose, I'm not going to lose a lot of money. I'm not really going to make a lot of money either, but maybe that's the next thing, is sitting at the high limit table and seeing what happens. I'm sure my wife would love that.
Honey, I put the house on the
Right, 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 right,
yeah, put the keys in the pot. Yeah.
right.
Yeah, well that's cool.
It's fun.
So so let's switch back to the firm. So are you president of the firm? Is that your
Yes,
partner, but you're also president?
as of January 1st of this year. Yes.
So what does that mean? What kind of stuff do you have to do as president?
It's really kind of putting to paper kind of what was happening already the last year or two. So how do I answer this? So firms can get kind of fragmented, I guess. Law firms, right? Especially at like big firms, you have your litigation department and your healthcare department and your corporate department, very, very segmented. At smaller firms, or the fragmentation is more like the individual lawyer paralegal teams, right? And I don't know how it is at other firms. I just know how it is here. And I know how it was at my last firm. And at that firm and this firm, the lawyer paralegal combo teams are almost kind of like their own mini law firm, so to speak. And they sort of say drive their ship the way they drive their ship, or sail their ship the way they sail their ship. And so someone needs to be paying attention to, the cohesion and making sure that, the client experience, right, is good, and the employee experience is going well, and that the intake is going well, and the marketing is going well, and that all of these day-to-day pieces are sort of fitting together the way they need to fit together. And that's kind of what I do. I've got my eye on that. I work closely with our office manager who's got his eye on that, sort of the day-to-day, making sure all the pieces are fitting together the way they're supposed to. I don't know if I explained that well or not, but that's what I spend a lot of my time doing, is making sure that pieces are fitting together so the law firm itself as a whole is plowing forward and doing what it's supposed to do, and things are going well, while at the same time everyone's kind of siloed in their own little universe. And I don't know how common that is at other law firms, but that's the way I've always seen it everywhere I've ever.
I think it's pretty common. So, I
Yeah.
mean, managing lawyers is not an easy task. So you've been doing it for a little while now. What have you
I,
learned, and what kind of advice do you have for others out there that may be in the same
I
position?
have to steal a quote from my partner, Sandy Bowen, which is the greatest quote ever. She says, what does she say? She's like, managing lawyers is like herding gerbils. She's like, it's not like herding cats. 'Cause cats, you can bribe them with food. You can maybe even bribe them with a little bit of money. But lawyers are just gerbils spinning on the wheel all day, just paying attention to what's in front of them. And it's really hard to get them off that wheel. And so my advice would be recognize that, right? Recognize the reality of what you're dealing with and that these are highly intelligent, highly capable people, right, who went to law school because they're smart. And most importantly, they wanted to have a job where they weren't micromanaged and weren't told what to do every day. You know what I mean? They like to argue. They're very smart. They see loopholes. So respect that, right? And figure out a framework that works for them and puts them in the best position to be the best lawyers they can be. And part of that is your own responsibility not to do the bad habits that a lot of partners and a lot of managers do. And I see it all the time. You know, offloading procrastination would be the main thing. You see a partner who's got a deadline and they haven't met their deadline because they procrastinate, so they give it to their associate. Hey, I need this by Wednesday. You know what I mean? Like, don't do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't offload your client's procrastination onto your other lawyers. People do that too. Like, the client comes to you with like a last minute thing. You need to own that yourself, or you need to tell the client to go to hell with their last minute request. One or the two. But what you don't want to do is then offload that to somewhere else. And I see that being a big mistake that a lot of lawyers make, is the offloading of others' procrastination, because there is nothing that will get your lawyers to hate you more than that. And that's the best advice I can probably give.
I was talking to somebody about that the other day, last week. We were reminiscing about a former firm and where that happened. He was an associate, and he basically told the guy to F off, and he had another partner backing him up, so it was okay.
Right.
But yeah, it had gotten
And
pretty bad.
with staff, it's different. And staff, they can't ever be promoted to lawyer, right? So they can come here and work as hard as they possibly can every day. They're never going to get promoted to lawyer. They're never going to get promoted to partner, I guess, unless they're in Arizona or DC now, where that's allowed, but not allowed in Virginia. We still have the prohibitional non-lawyer ownership. And so, you've got to put processes in place that, make their job easier, but also make it so they enjoy coming to work. So when they go home and talk to their spouse about how their day was, they're not like, my day sucked, because that's how you're going to lose people now. Because, we live in a time now where, you can work from home. This is my joke that I make on LinkedIn. You can sell coconuts on the internet now and work from home. Like, it's real. Like, there's a real job out there where people sell coconuts on the internet. So that's the type of world we live in now, where there's so many options for people working from home, doing things that are totally different than the way things were 20 years ago. Someone who's going to get in their car and drive to an office and work at a law firm, you've got to make that a positive experience for them. And so for us, that's something that we try our very best to do. And really, they come before everything. They come before the clients and they come before the lawyers. The staff comes first 100% of the time, because the staff will leave if you don't put them first in 2025. Maybe not 2005, but in 2025, they will say, see you later, alligator. And I think lawyers need to respect that and understand that as their reality, and do everything they can to make sure, while at the same time balancing the fact that you need rules, you need processes, and you need accountability. And that's sort of the challenge that comes with being a manager or a partner, is, letting people, not micromanaging people, but at the same time making sure there's accountability. And as you get larger, of course, that becomes even more challenging. It's really easy when it's just you and someone else, but when there's 20 people, 30 people, 40 people, that's when it gets challenging. So
That's great advice. Really great advice. There's a ton that we were not able to get to today. We talked about a lot of good stuff. There's a ton we didn't get to, but I appreciate you coming on. And I am looking forward to that book.
Seriously. Awesome. Yes.
Seriously.
Yes.
So for anybody out there, and I encourage everybody to find you on LinkedIn, give Matt Long a follow, a really good, funny stuff and interesting post. So Matt, what's other than LinkedIn, what's a good way for folks to find you if they want to find you?
Well, assuming there aren't any marketing people from strange companies listening, you can email me at mlong@btclawva.com, MLONG and our URL is btclawva.com. I am really easy to reach by email, probably easier than any lawyer out there. Not the best with the telephone, but very good. If you email me, you will hear back from me within 24 hours top, probably within an hour. So LinkedIn and email are the best ways to get in touch with me.
Awesome, Matt. This has been fun, man. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.lawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.